The fast-moving tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela are raising new questions about just how far military force can go without triggering a wider conflict. 21 maritime strikes have now been carried out against what the United States calls drug smuggling vessels, with the Trump administration insisting these actions fall within the rules of war. This includes a follow-up strike on an alleged drug-carrying boat in the Caribbean Sea back in early September. Earlier this week, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended his department's and the military's response.
I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He sunk the boat, and eliminated the threat.
All this raises the central question, and today, how do the laws of armed conflict actually apply here, especially when the U.S. says it is not at war? To help break all that down for us, we're now joined by Laurie Blank, clinical professor of law at Emory University. Laurie, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Help us define, Laurie, the landscape here. What exactly are the rules of war, and when do they apply in the U.S. if the U.S. says it's not at war with Venezuela?
Yeah, so we have a lot of terms being thrown around in this conversation, but the bottom line here is that there is no armed conflict going on. There's not an armed conflict with Venezuela. There's not an armed conflict with drug cartels as yet unidentified entirely. And so while there is important conversation to be had about the rules that apply in wartime, about the proper conduct, moral, ethical, legal conduct in wartime, what we're talking about here is not war. So we're trying to the conversation's layering things that really don't belong together.
Yeah, so Secretary Hegseth says the commander, Vice Admiral Bradley, in this case, did have complete authority to sink the vessel. What legal standards, Laurie, determine whether that strike was justified?
So in this case, we're talking about the basic peacetime rules for dealing with drug smuggling and so on. And our Navy and our Coast Guard have decades of experience in dealing with this. They interdict vessels on the high seas. They seize the cargo. They seize the vessels. They've been doing this for a long time. So it's not entirely clear why that has been thrown out the window, so to speak, and a new approach of simply targeting the boats with lethal force has been imposed. There doesn't seem to be any legal basis for that.
And these actions, Laurie, we understand are not happening in a vacuum, right? The world is watching. You've got Venezuela calling these actions violations of its sovereignty, potential acts of war. We're trying to define the terms here. So legally, when does a targeted strike become a violation of state sovereignty in this case?
Well, from the facts that we have available, the strikes are taking place in international waters. So they're not within Venezuela's territory or territorial waters. That matters in this case. If, in fact, the U.S. were to carry out strikes on the territory of Venezuela or in Venezuelan waters, as you know, we've seen some reports that maybe that's being considered, that would clearly be a violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. Here, the vessels don't appear to be flagged to any state. That helps us understand whether they belong to a state. So I don't think we have necessarily sovereignty issues here in that respect. But what we do have is, killing of people. And I'm not sure we know who those people are. We don't have a lot of facts about that, or necessarily what's being carried in those boats, where those boats are going. There's a lot of unknowns here that would really help put together some of the analysis. But I think the bottom line is there's no basis in international law for calling this an armed conflict. There's no basis in international law for targeting vessels when we have another method that is perfectly effective to stop them from transiting the drugs that seem to be the problem at the base of this whole scenario.
And it doesn't seem, Laurie, as though, these strikes are going to stop cold turkey here. You talked about still several unknowns on the table. What obligations does the U.S. have to release those details and information about these strikes as it concerns these vessels here?
Well, I think the immediate place in which we're going to see more information or calls for more information is in the halls of Congress. And Congress has an important role to play here. It is where most of the war powers that are set out in the Constitution reside. The president, of course, is commander in chief, but Congress has most of the powers with respect to war. And I think what we're seeing in these calls for oversight and for hearings is Congress beginning to step into the role that it needs to be playing in that respect. I think we're going to see a lot more there than we're going to see in the international community, but we have seen a number of U.S. allies, the United Kingdom in particular, saying they're not going to share information that they're gathering through their intelligence channels because they don't want to be tied to, involved in any way in these strikes that they see as legally problematic, that most commentators, most analysts in the discourse are saying are legally problematic. And so we're seeing through the ordinary course of how states interact with each other, we are seeing pushback in that respect as well.
Laurie Blank, clinical professor of law at Emory University. We'll see how all of this develops and unfolds and see if this escalates at all. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.